standing at the heart of downtown Denver today, surrounded by gleaming skyscrapers and bustling city streets. It's almost impossible to imagine that this sprawling metropolis was once nothing more than empty prairie, stretching endlessly toward the Rocky Mountains. But look beyond the modern facade and you'll discover layers upon layers of remarkable history. Tonight, we'll uncover how a desperate search for gold transformed a desolate wilderness into one of America's most dynamic cities, home to nearly 3 million people across the metropolitan area. Denver has weathered economic booms and devastating busts, survived floods and fires, and even earned the nickname that would define its identity forever. We'll start with a surprising discovery along the South Platte River, and from there, we'll follow the city's dramatic rise from a collection of ramshackle mining camps to the mile-high metropolis we know today. So just relax and let your mind wander as we explore the captivating history of Denver, Colorado. When you think of Denver today, perhaps you picture the iconic skyline framed by the majestic Rocky Mountains, or maybe the bustling activity around Union Station with light rail trains gliding through the city centre. This urban landscape feels thoroughly modern and established. And indeed, downtown Denver serves as the economic and cultural heart of the entire Rocky Mountain region. As home to major corporations, world-class museums, and championship sports teams, there's a real sense of permanence and prosperity in this part of Colorado. You can imagine that this place has witnessed incredible transformations over the decades. Relatively speaking, most of the architecture in downtown Denver isn't that old. The gleaming office towers were built in recent decades, as were many of the cultural attractions and transportation hubs. But the area now known as Denver has been a significant crossroads since the mid-19th century, and it's also the site of a hidden chapter in American frontier history. In the late 1850s, along the banks of the South Platte River, some precious flakes were discovered that would change everything. Gold. These tiny fragments of wealth were found in Cherry Creek, a small tributary that flowed into the South Platte. It's remarkable to think that here, where traffic now flows along busy highways, prospectors once knelt in icy water panning for fortune. However, the true story of Denver begins not with the gold itself, but with the ambitious men who saw opportunity in the chaos. The land that would become Denver had been inhabited by humans for thousands of years before any European ever set foot in Colorado. Native American tribes, particularly the Cheyenne and Arapaho peoples, had established seasonal camps and hunting grounds throughout the region. These communities understood the rhythms of the high plains, following buffalo herds and utilizing the abundant resources of the area. The South Platte River provided fresh water, while the nearby mountains offered shelter and game. For generations, these tribes lived in harmony with the demanding environment of the Colorado Territory. They developed sophisticated techniques for surviving the harsh winters and making the most of the brief but productive growing seasons. The area around present-day Denver served as an important meeting place where different tribal groups would gather for trade and ceremonies. Life moved at the pace of the seasons, and the vast grasslands stretched unbroken toward distant horizons. But everything changed in 1858 when rumors of gold began spreading across the nation like wildfire. The California gold rush had ended nearly a decade earlier, and thousands of prospectors were eager for another chance at striking it rich. When word reached the eastern states that gold had been found along the South Platte River, a new rush was born. This time, the destination wasn't California, but the remote Colorado Territory. The first significant discovery came from a small party of prospectors led by William Green Russell, a veteran of the Georgia goldfields. Russell and his companions had traveled west from Kansas, following reports of gold-bearing sands along Colorado's rivers. In July 1858, near the confluence of Cherry Creek and the South Platte River, they found what they were looking for. The amounts were modest, perhaps $10 worth of gold dust per day, but it was enough to spark excitement. News of Russell's discovery spread rapidly through the frontier settlements of Kansas and Nebraska. Newspapers picked up the story, and soon headlines proclaimed the riches waiting in the Colorado Territory. The timing couldn't have been better. The nation was still reeling from the economic depression known as the Panic of 1857, and thousands of unemployed men were desperate for opportunity. The promise of easy gold in Colorado seemed like salvation. By the autumn of 1858, the first wave of gold seekers began arriving in the area. They came by wagon train, on horseback, and some even walked hundreds of miles carrying their supplies. The journey was treacherous, crossing the Great Plains with limited water sources and the constant threat of severe weather. Many turned back before reaching Colorado, but those who persevered found a harsh and unforgiving landscape. The reality of gold mining along Cherry Creek proved far more difficult than the newspaper stories had suggested. The placer deposits were limited, and most prospectors found barely enough gold to pay for their supplies. Winter arrived early and brutally in 1858, catching many unprepared fortune seekers in flimsy shelters with inadequate provisions. Some died from exposure and starvation, while others abandoned their claims and headed back east with tales of hardship rather than wealth. But a few determined individuals saw opportunity beyond the gold itself. Among them was William Larimer Jr., a land speculator from Kansas who arrived in November 1858. Larimer understood that successful mining camps needed towns to support them, and towns needed someone with vision to plan and develop them. While other men focused on panning for gold, Larimer focused on something potentially more valuable: real estate. Larimer claimed a strategic piece of land near the confluence of Cherry Creek and the South Platte River. The location offered several advantages: access to water, relatively flat ground suitable for building, and a position that controlled river crossings in the area. Most importantly, it sat directly between the existing mining claims and the supply routes coming from Kansas. Anyone traveling to or from the goldfields would need to pass through this spot. With characteristic frontier boldness, Larimer named his town site Denver City, honoring James Denver, the governor of Kansas Territory. The choice was politically motivated, as Larimer hoped to curry favor with territorial authorities who would eventually need to approve land claims and township boundaries. Ironically, by the time Larimer founded his settlement, James Denver had already resigned from his position, but the name stuck. Larimer wasn't the only entrepreneur with designs on the area. Across Cherry Creek, another group of settlers had established their own town called Auraria, named after a gold mining district in Georgia. The founders of Auraria included some of the original prospectors who had arrived with William Russell. Competition between the two settlements was intense, with each town trying to attract merchants, saloon keepers, and other businesses essential to frontier commerce. The winter of 1858 to 1859 was particularly harsh, and many of the hastily constructed buildings in both Denver City and Auraria were little more than crude log cabins and canvas tents. Supplies were scarce and expensive, having been transported hundreds of miles by wagon train. A simple meal could cost more than a day's wages back east, while basic tools and mining equipment commanded premium prices. Despite the hardships, both settlements managed to survive their first winter. As spring arrived in 1859, a new wave of gold seekers began streaming into the territory. This group was larger and better prepared than the previous year's arrivals. They brought with them improved mining techniques, better equipment, and more realistic expectations about the challenges they would face. The spring of 1859 also brought significant gold discoveries in the mountains west of Denver. Prospectors venturing into the foothills found richer deposits than anything along Cherry Creek. These mountain strikes included the famous Gregory Lode near present-day Central City, and substantial placer deposits in areas that would become Breckenridge and Fairplay. Suddenly, the Colorado gold rush was real, and Denver City found itself perfectly positioned as the gateway to the mining districts. As prospectors headed into the mountains, they needed supplies, equipment, and services that only a substantial town could provide. Denver City became the natural outfitting point for mining expeditions. Merchants established stores selling everything from pickaxes and pans to food and clothing. Freight companies set up operations to transport goods between the railroad terminus in Kansas and the Colorado mining camps. The competition between Denver City and Auraria continued throughout 1859, but it was becoming clear that having two rival towns in such close proximity was inefficient and potentially harmful to both. Business leaders from each settlement began discussing the possibility of consolidation. The merger would combine resources, eliminate duplicate services, and create a stronger economic base for attracting investment and development. Negotiations between the two towns were complex, involving questions of leadership, naming rights, and the location of key civic buildings. Eventually, pragmatism prevailed over pride. In 1860, Denver City and Auraria officially merged, with the combined settlement retaining the name Denver. The merger created Colorado's first substantial municipality and established the foundation for future growth. The consolidated town of Denver faced immediate challenges that would test its resolve and ingenuity. The gold rush economy was inherently unstable, subject to the whims of mineral discoveries and the fickleness of prospector populations. When strikes played out or proved less profitable than expected, entire mining camps could empty overnight. Denver's survival depended on diversifying beyond simply serving the mining trade. Forward-thinking residents began developing agriculture in the fertile South Platte River Valley. They established farms and ranches to supply food to the growing population, reducing dependence on expensive goods shipped from Kansas. Local sawmills processed timber from the nearby mountains, while brick kilns used clay deposits to produce building materials for more permanent construction. The early 1860s brought both opportunity and uncertainty to Denver. The outbreak of the Civil War created new challenges for the isolated Colorado Territory, while continued gold discoveries in the mountains promised sustained economic activity. Denver stood at a crossroads, poised to either flourish as a regional center or fade into obscurity like so many other frontier boomtowns. What happened next would determine not just Denver's fate, but the entire character of Colorado's development. The decisions made by Denver's early leaders during these crucial years would echo through generations, shaping the city's destiny and establishing patterns of growth that continue to influence the mile-high metropolis today. High metropolis today. The territorial government faced a critical decision in 1861 that would profoundly impact Denver's future. Colorado needed a capital city, and several communities were vying for the honor. Golden, located closer to the mountain mining districts, seemed like a natural choice. Central City boasted the richest gold deposits and a rapidly growing population. Even the small settlement of Colorado City, nestled at the base of Pikes Peak, had its advocates. But Denver possessed something the other towns lacked: strategic positioning and determined leadership. The city's merchants and civic leaders launched an aggressive campaign to secure the territorial capital designation. They highlighted Denver's central location, its growing transportation network, and its potential for long-term stability. Most importantly, they offered practical incentives, including land donations for government buildings and promises of financial support for territorial operations. The campaign succeeded. In 1867, Denver was officially designated as the territorial capital, a decision that would prove transformative for the young city's development. Government functions brought a steady influx of officials, clerks, and support personnel who needed housing, food, and services. More significantly, the capital designation attracted banks, law firms, and other professional services that viewed proximity to government as essential for their operations. This period also witnessed Denver's first major infrastructure improvements. The dirt streets that had served adequately for a frontier mining camp were increasingly inadequate for a territorial capital. City leaders organized efforts to grade major thoroughfare, install wooden sidewalks, and establish a basic system of street lighting using oil lamps. These improvements may seem modest by today's standards, but they represented a significant commitment to permanence and civic pride. The arrival of telegraph service in 1863 connected Denver to the outside world in ways that would have seemed magical just a few years earlier. Messages that once took weeks to travel between Denver and eastern cities could now be transmitted in hours. The psychological impact was enormous, reducing the sense of isolation that had plagued frontier communities. Businessmen could coordinate with suppliers, families could maintain contact with distant relatives, and news of national events reached Denver almost as quickly as it reached New York or Chicago. However, the most transformative development of this era was also the most contentious: the question of railroad connections. By the mid-1860s, railroad construction was advancing rapidly across the American continent. The Transcontinental Railroad was nearing completion, and numerous branch lines were being planned to connect major cities with the growing national network. For Denver, railroad access represented the difference between continued prosperity and potential decline. The challenge was geographic. Denver sat on the high plains, nearly a mile above sea level, with the Rocky Mountains rising dramatically to the west. Building a railroad through such terrain was expensive and technically demanding. Early surveys suggested that it might be more economical to route the Transcontinental Railroad through Wyoming, bypassing Colorado entirely. Such a decision would be catastrophic for Denver, potentially relegating the city to a regional backwater. Denver's business community recognized the existential threat and responded with characteristic frontier determination. They formed the Denver Pacific Railroad Company in 1867, with the ambitious goal of building a rail connection to the transcontinental line. The project required substantial capital investment, something that was scarce in the isolated Colorado territory. Local leaders mortgaged their businesses, sold personal property, and convinced Eastern investors to support what many considered a risky venture. Construction began in 1868, and the challenges proved even greater than anticipated. The high altitude made work difficult for labourers unaccustomed to thin air. Materials had to be transported by wagon from distant railheads, dramatically increasing costs. Winter weather frequently halted progress, and spring floods washed out partially completed sections. Several times, the project nearly collapsed due to funding shortages and engineering difficulties. But Denver's residents refused to accept failure. They organised volunteer work parties to supplement paid crews, donated materials from local businesses, and lobbied territorial and federal officials for financial support. Women's groups raised money through bake sales and charity events, while saloon keepers contributed portions of their profits to the railroad fund. The entire community seemed to understand that their future depended on completing this crucial transportation link. The breakthrough came in 1870, when the Denver Pacific Railroad finally reached Cheyenne, Wyoming, connecting Denver to the Transcontinental Railroad system. The completion was celebrated with a massive festival that drew visitors from across the territory. For the first time in its history, Denver was directly connected to both the Atlantic and Pacific coasts by rail. The journey that once took weeks by wagon train could now be completed in days. The railroad's impact on Denver was immediate and profound. The cost of goods plummeted as transportation expenses dropped dramatically. Fresh produce, manufactured items, and luxury goods that had been prohibitively expensive became accessible to ordinary residents. More importantly, the railroad made Denver an attractive destination for new residents and businesses seeking opportunities in the growing West. Population growth accelerated rapidly in the early 1870s. The 1870 census counted approximately 4,700 residents in Denver, but by 1880, that number had more than tripled to over 35,000. The new arrivals came from the diverse backgrounds: farmers from the Midwest seeking fertile land, merchants from eastern cities looking for business opportunities, skilled craftsmen attracted by construction boom, and families simply hoping for a fresh start in a growing community. This rapid growth brought both opportunities and challenges. The demand for housing outstripped supply, leading to a construction boom that transformed Denver's appearance. Multi-story brick buildings replaced the crude log structures of the mining camp era. Grand hotels were built to accommodate the increasing number of business travelers and tourists. Residential neighborhoods expanded in all directions, with elegant mansions for the wealthy and modest cottages for working families. The expansion also strained the city's primitive infrastructure. The informal arrangements that had worked for a small frontier settlement were inadequate for a rapidly growing city. Water supplies became contaminated, sewage systems overflowed, and fire protection was woefully inadequate. A series of devastating fires in the early 1870s destroyed entire city blocks, highlighting the urgent need for improved municipal services. City leaders responded by incorporating Denver as a municipality in 1861, though the practical implementation of city government took several more years to develop effectively. They established a volunteer fire department, organized a basic police force, and began planning for more sophisticated water and sewage systems. These improvements required significant financial investment, leading to Denver's first municipal bond issues and the establishment of a formal tax collection system. The economic base was also diversifying beyond mining and government functions. Agriculture flourished in the South Platte River Valley, with farmers producing wheat, corn, and vegetables for the growing urban market. Cattle ranching expanded on the eastern plains, taking advantage of railroad access to ship beef to distant markets. Manufacturing began to develop, including flour mills, breweries, and foundries that processed raw materials from the surrounding region. Denver's cultural life evolved dramatically during this period as well. The rough frontier atmosphere of the mining camp era gave way to more refined social customs. Churches of various denominations were established, reflecting the religious diversity of the growing population. Schools were founded to educate the increasing number of children, and newspapers provided both local news and connections to national events. Entertainment options expanded beyond the saloons and gambling halls that had dominated the early years. Theatres presented touring productions from eastern cities, while music halls featured both local and travelling performers. Social clubs formed around professional, ethnic, and recreational interests. The city even organised its first formal celebrations and parades, marking holidays and commemorating significant local events. But beneath this veneer of progress and prosperity, Denver was developing the social stratification typical of growing American cities. Wealthy merchants, successful miners, and professional men built impressive homes in fashionable neighborhoods. Their wives organized charitable societies and cultural events that defined the city's emerging social elite. Meanwhile, working-class families crowded into modest housing near industrial areas, while the poorest residents lived in ramshackle structures on the city's outskirts. Ethnic diversity added complexity to Denver's social landscape. In addition to the Anglo-American majority, the city attracted significant populations of German and Irish immigrants, Chinese workers who had completed railroad construction projects, Mexican families from the Southern Territories, and African Americans seeking opportunities in the post-Civil War West. Each group brought distinct cultural traditions while facing varying degrees of acceptance and discrimination from the established community. The 1870s concluded with Denver having successfully navigated the transition from frontier mining camp to established regional center. The city had survived economic downturns, infrastructure challenges, and social growing pains to emerge as Colorado's undisputed urban leader. Railroad connections provided access to national markets, while territorial capital status brought political influence and stability. Yet Denver's greatest challenges and opportunities still lay ahead. The coming decades would bring new waves of immigration, additional railroad construction, and the discovery of silver deposits that would dwarf the original gold rush. The decisions made during these formative years had established patterns of growth and development that would guide Denver through the boom and bust cycles that lay ahead, ultimately shaping the character of the mile-high metropolis for generations to come. The discovery of silver in the Colorado mountains during the late 1870s would dwarf even the excitement of the original gold rush. While prospectors had been finding traces of silver alongside gold for years, it wasn't until improved mining techniques and transportation made extraction profitable that the true wealth of Colorado's mineral deposits became apparent. The silver boom that followed would transform Denver from a regional center into a city of national significance. The Leadville Silver Strike of 1878 exemplified this new era of mining wealth. Located high in the Rocky Mountains, at an elevation of over 10,000 feet, Leadville produced more silver than anywhere else in the world during its peak years. The camp that sprang up around the mines grew from nothing to a population of over 30,000 in less than 2 years. Every one of those miners, merchants, and fortune seekers needed supplies, equipment, and services that could only be efficiently provided through Denver. Denver's position as the supply hub for Colorado's mining districts became even more crucial during the silver boom. The city's merchants established vast warehouses filled with everything from mining machinery to fine imported goods. Freight companies expanded their operations to handle the massive volume of materials flowing between the railroad terminus and the mountain camps. Banks opened branches to handle the unprecedented amounts of silver being shipped out of the mountains and the equally impressive sums of money flowing back in. The wealth generated by silver mining created a new class of millionaires in Denver, men whose fortunes dwarfed those of the earlier gold rush pioneers. Horace Tabor, who had operated a general store in Leadville, became one of Colorado's richest men through his silver investments. David Moffett built a banking empire that extended far beyond Colorado's borders. These silver barons constructed elaborate mansions along Denver's tree-lined streets, competed to build the most impressive commercial buildings, and patronized arts and culture in ways that transformed the city's social landscape. The architectural legacy of the silver boom era remains visible in Denver today. The Brown Palace Hotel, opened in 1892, represented the pinnacle of luxury and sophistication. Its 9-story triangular design and elegant atrium created a gathering place for the wealthy and powerful. The Colorado State Capitol building, with its distinctive gold dome, was completed using materials and craftsmanship that would have been impossible without silver boom wealth. Churches, theaters, and private mansions from this period established architectural standards that influenced Denver's development for decades. But the silver boom also accelerated social and economic tensions that had been building since Denver's founding. The vast wealth disparity between mining millionaires and ordinary workers created resentment and labor unrest. The rapid influx of new residents strained housing supplies and municipal services beyond their capacity. Environmental problems mounted as mining operations contaminated water sources and industrial activities polluted the air around Denver. The Chinese community in Denver faced particular challenges during this period. Many Chinese immigrants had come to Colorado to work on railroad construction projects, and they established a vibrant community along Wasey Street in lower downtown Denver. They operated laundries, restaurants, and import businesses that served both the Chinese community and the broader Denver population. However, anti-Chinese sentiment was growing across the American West, fueled by economic competition and racial prejudice. The tensions erupted in October 1880 during what became known as the Denver Anti-Chinese Riot. A dispute between Chinese and white workers escalated into mob violence that destroyed much of Denver's Chinatown and forced hundreds of Chinese residents to flee the city. The riot lasted for several days before authorities restored order, but the damage to Denver's Chinese community was lasting. Many never returned, and those who stayed faced continued discrimination and harassment. The incident highlighted the darker aspects of Denver's rapid growth and the challenges of building a cohesive community from such diverse populations. City leaders were forced to confront questions about law enforcement, civil rights, and the kind of society they wanted Denver to become. While some progress was made in subsequent years, the legacy of discrimination and exclusion would continue to shape Denver's development well into the 20th century. Labor disputes became increasingly common as Denver's economy diversified and industrialized. Workers in the smelters that processed ore from the mountain mines organized unions to demand better wages and working conditions. Railroad employees sought collective bargaining rights to address grievances about dangerous working conditions and irregular employment. Even skilled craftsmen and office workers began forming associations to protect their interests in the rapidly changing economy. The response from Denver's business community was often hostile to worker organizing efforts. Company owners viewed unions as threats to their authority and profitability. They hired private security forces to break strikes, imported replacement workers from other regions, and pressured local government officials to support their positions. These conflicts created lasting divisions within Denver society and established patterns of labor management relations that would persist for generations. Despite these social tensions, Denver continued to attract new residents and businesses throughout the 1880s. The city's population reached nearly 107,000 by 1890, making it one of the fastest growing cities in the American West. The downtown business district expanded westward from the original settlement near Cherry Creek, with new office buildings, department stores, and hotels creating an increasingly sophisticated urban environment. The residential areas also reflected Denver's growing prosperity and social complexity. The wealthy built impressive homes in neighborhoods like Capitol Hill, which featured tree-lined streets, landscaped parks, and easy access to downtown businesses. Middle-class families settled in areas like Highland and Riverside, where modest but comfortable houses provided respectable addresses at affordable prices. Working-class neighborhoods developed near industrial areas, often lacking basic municipal services, but offering proximity to employment opportunities. Transportation within the growing city became an increasingly important issue. The distances between residential areas and downtown businesses were too great for comfortable walking, especially at Denver's high altitude. Horse-drawn streetcars provided the first solution, with several competing companies operating routes along major streets. The streetcar lines influenced residential development patterns as neighborhoods with good transit connections grew more rapidly than isolated areas. The introduction of electric streetcars in the late 1880s revolutionized urban transportation in Denver. The electric system was faster, more reliable, and cleaner than horse-drawn vehicles. It also made possible the development of suburban residential areas that would have been impractical without efficient transportation connections to downtown employment centers. The streetcar network encouraged the spread of Denver's residential areas in all directions, creating the foundation for the metropolitan area's future expansion. Denver's cultural institutions matured significantly during this period as well. The city's first public library opened in 1889, housed in a building donated by philanthropist Andrew Carnegie. The Denver Art Museum had its origins in this era, growing from small private collections to become a significant cultural institution. Music organizations flourished, including the Denver Symphony Orchestra and numerous smaller ensembles that performed for both elite and popular audiences. Educational opportunities expanded to serve the growing population. The University of Denver was founded in 1864, though it remained a small institution focused primarily on training teachers and clergy. Public schools improved gradually, though they struggled to keep pace with their rapidly growing number of school-age children. Private academies served the children of wealthy families, while working-class families often had to choose between education and the income their children could earn through employment. The newspaper industry in Denver reflected the city's growing sophistication and political complexity. Multiple daily newspapers competed for readers, each representing different political viewpoints and business interests. The Rocky Mountain News had been Denver's first newspaper, founded during the Gold Rush era to serve the mining community. By the 1880s, it faced competition from the Denver Republican, the Denver Times, and several smaller publications that served specific ethnic or professional communities. These newspapers played crucial roles in shaping public opinion about local and national issues. They covered everything from city council meetings and business developments to national politics and international affairs. The editorial positions taken by newspaper publishers influenced elections, public policy debates, and social attitudes throughout the Denver area. The competitive newspaper environment also encouraged high standards of journalism and comprehensive coverage of community events. Religious life in Denver became increasingly diverse and organized during the Silver Boom era. The rough frontier atmosphere of the early mining camp days gave way to more formal religious observances and the construction of impressive church buildings. Protestant denominations dominated, but Catholic, Jewish, and other religious communities also established congregations and built places of worship that served their growing memberships. The religious institutions provided more than just spiritual guidance for Denver's residents. Churches and synagogues organized charitable activities to help the poor and disadvantaged. They provided social activities that helped newcomers integrate into community life. Religious leaders often took positions on political and social issues, influencing public debates about everything from labor relations to municipal improvements. As the 1880s drew to a close, Denver had established itself as the undisputed center of economic and political power in Colorado. The city's banks controlled financing for mining operations throughout the Rocky Mountain region. Its merchants supplied goods and services to communities across the territory. The territorial government, soon to become state government, was firmly established in Denver's impressive Capitol building. But the prosperity built on silver mining contained the seeds of future challenges. The price of silver depended on federal monetary policies and international market conditions beyond Denver's control. Mining operations were inherently temporary, as ore deposits would eventually be exhausted. The city's leaders understood that long-term prosperity required continued diversification of the economic base and development of industries that could survive the inevitable end of the mining boom. The stage was set for Denver's next great transformation as Colorado prepared for statehood, and the city positioned itself to become a major American metropolis. The foundations laid during the Silver Boom era would support Denver through the economic upheavals and opportunities that lay ahead, though not without significant challenges and setbacks that would test the community's resilience and adaptability. The transition from territorial status to statehood marked a pivotal moment in Denver's evolution. When Colorado officially became the 38th state on August 1st, 1876, Denver's position as the state capital was confirmed permanently. The timing was particularly significant, as the nation was celebrating its centennial year, and Colorado earned the nickname the Centennial State in honor of this coincidence. Statehood brought new responsibilities and opportunities to Denver. The city now served as the seat of state government, attracting additional federal offices, courts, and administrative functions. This governmental expansion created a stable employment base that was less vulnerable to the boom and bust cycles that characterized mining economies. Civil servants, lawyers, and other professionals flocked to Denver, contributing to a more diverse and stable economic foundation. The late 1870s and early 1880s also witnessed Denver's emergence as a major transportation hub for the entire Rocky Mountain region. Beyond the original Denver Pacific connection to Cheyenne, multiple railroad companies built lines converging on the city. The Denver and Rio Grande Railroad pushed south toward New Mexico and eventually reached Salt Lake City. The Colorado Central extended into the mining districts of Central City and Georgetown. Each new rail connection strengthened Denver's position as the distribution center for an ever-expanding territory. Railroad construction in the rugged Colorado terrain required remarkable engineering achievements. The Georgetown Loop, completed in 1884, became famous for its spectacular spiral design that allowed trains to gain elevation through a series of curves and bridges. Visitors from around the world came to Denver specifically to experience these mountain railroad journeys, contributing to the city's growing reputation as a tourist destination. The influx of tourists and business travelers created demand for increasingly sophisticated accommodations and entertainment. The Windsor Hotel, opened in 1880, rivaled the finest establishments in Chicago or San Francisco. Its 5 stories contained luxury suites, elegant dining rooms, and modern conveniences like steam heat and gas lighting. The hotel's grand ballroom hosted elaborate social events that attracted prominent visitors from across the nation. Theatre and opera flourished during this golden age of Denver culture. The Tabor Opera House, financed by silver magnate Horace Tabor, opened in 1881 with a production featuring some of the era's most celebrated performers. The 3-story building contained over 1,500 seats and featured elaborate decorations imported from Europe. Major touring companies included Denver on their circuits, bringing the latest Broadway productions and European operas to audiences hungry for cultural sophistication. But Denver's cultural ambitions sometimes exceeded practical considerations. The most notorious example was Horace Tabor's personal life, which became a national scandal when he divorced his wife to marry Elizabeth Baby Doe McCourt. The lavish wedding ceremony and Tabor's extravagant lifestyle symbolized both the possibilities and excesses of silver boom wealth. When silver prices eventually collapsed, Tabor's fortune evaporated, leaving behind cautionary tales about the temporary nature of mining riches. The 1880s brought significant improvements to Denver's urban infrastructure. Gas streetlights replaced oil lamps along major thoroughfares, while the first telephone exchange connected businesses and wealthy residents. Water service expanded from simple wells and cisterns to a more comprehensive system, drawing from mountain sources. Sewage systems, though still primitive by modern standards, began addressing the sanitation problems that had plagued the rapidly growing city. Fire protection remained a constant concern in a city built largely of wood and heated by coal stoves and fireplaces. The volunteer fire companies that had served the early settlement gave way to a professional fire department equipped with steam-powered engines and trained personnel. Fire alarm systems using telegraph technology allowed faster response to emergencies, though major fires continued to periodically devastate entire city blocks. The establishment of City Park in 1882 reflected Denver's growing civic consciousness and desire to match the amenities of established eastern cities. The 320-acre park featured lakes, walking paths, and recreational facilities that provided residents with relief from the increasingly crowded urban environment. The park also housed the city's first zoo, which began with a small collection of animals donated by local residents and eventually grew into a significant attraction. Education continued to expand as Denver's population grew more diverse and prosperous. The public school system struggled to keep pace with demand, often housing multiple grades in single rooms and relying on minimally trained teachers. However, several private academies established reputations for academic excellence, attracting students from across the Western Territories. The Wolf Hall School for Girls and the Jarvis Hall Military Academy provided educational opportunities that rivaled those available in eastern cities. Higher education made significant strides during this period. The University of Denver expanded its curriculum and faculty, though it remained primarily focused on teacher training and religious education. The Colorado School of Mines, founded in Golden in 1874, attracted students interested in the technical aspects of mining and metallurgy. These institutions helped establish Colorado as more than just a source of raw materials, developing local expertise in fields crucial to the region's economic development. Denver's medical facilities improved dramatically as the city attracted physicians trained in Eastern medical schools. The growth of hospitals, private practices, and pharmaceutical services reflected both the increasing population and rising standards of living. The high altitude and dry climate were promoted as beneficial for certain medical conditions, particularly tuberculosis, leading to the establishment of several sanatoriums that attracted patients from across the nation. The legal profession flourished in Denver as the complexity of business transactions and property disputes increased. Mining claims, railroad rights-of-way, water rights, and real estate transactions required sophisticated legal expertise. Denver's lawyers developed specializations in areas unique to the Western environment, while also handling the full range of civil and criminal matters that arose in a growing city. Banking evolved from simple money-changing operations to sophisticated financial institutions capable of handling large-scale investments and commercial transactions. The First National Bank of Denver, chartered in 1865, grew to become one of the most influential financial institutions in the Rocky Mountain region. Competition among banks drove improvements in services, interest rates, and business practices that benefited both individual customers and commercial enterprises. The retail sector transformed as Denver's population became more affluent and demanding. Simple general stores gave way to specialized shops selling clothing, jewelry, books, and luxury goods. Department stores began appearing in the downtown area, offering wider selections and more sophisticated shopping experiences. The Daniels and Fisher department store, established in 1864, grew to become one of Denver's most prominent retail establishments, eventually constructing a distinctive clock tower that became a city landmark. Manufacturing developed gradually as Denver's market grew large enough to support local production. Flour mills processed grain from the eastern plains, while breweries took advantage of pure mountain water and the large population of German immigrants who brought beer-making expertise. Foundries and machine shops served the mining industry, while smaller manufacturers produced everything from furniture to clothing for local consumption. The agricultural sector surrounding Denver became increasingly important as transportation improvements made it practical to ship produce to distant markets. The South Platte River Valley proved ideal for growing vegetables, while the higher plains supported wheat and corn production. Cattle ranching expanded eastward from Denver, taking advantage of railroad connections to ship beef to Chicago and other major markets. Water rights became an increasingly contentious issue as Denver's population grew and agricultural development expanded. The prior appropriation doctrine which granted water rights to the first users who put water to beneficial use, created complex legal frameworks that often favoured established interests over newcomers. Disputes over water allocation would continue to shape Denver's development and relationships with surrounding communities for generations. The 1880s concluded with Denver having established itself as a major American city, though one still dependent on the volatile mining economy. The population had reached impressive levels, infrastructure had improved dramatically, and cultural institutions rivaled those of much older cities. However, warning signs were beginning to appear that would test Denver's resilience and adaptability in the decades ahead. Silver prices, which had remained relatively stable throughout the boom years, began showing signs of volatility as national monetary policies changed and international competition increased. Mining operations in some districts were beginning to show signs of depletion, though new discoveries continued to offset declining production from older mines. Most ominously, political movements in Washington were questioning the federal government's commitment to silver as a monetary standard. Denver's leaders recognized these potential challenges and began promoting economic diversification with increasing urgency. They understood that the city's long-term prosperity required development of industries and institutions that could survive the eventual decline of mining. The foundations laid during the silver boom years would provide the platform for this transition, though the process would prove more difficult and traumatic than anyone anticipated. The stage was set for Denver's next great test as the 19th century drew to a close. The city had grown from a crude mining camp to a sophisticated urban centre in just 3 decades, but the greatest challenges to its survival and prosperity still lay ahead. The decisions made during the coming crisis would determine whether Denver would join the ranks of America's permanent major cities or fade into obscurity like so many other Western boom towns. The warning signs that Denver's leaders had begun to notice in the late 1880s became impossible to ignore as the new decade dawned. Silver prices, which had remained the bedrock of Colorado's prosperity for over a decade, began experiencing troubling fluctuations that sent ripples of anxiety through the business community. What had once seemed like an inexhaustible source of wealth was revealing itself to be subject to forces far beyond Denver's control. The Sherman Silver Purchase Act of 1890 initially provided some reassurance to Colorado's silver interests. The federal legislation required the government to purchase substantial quantities of silver each month, helping to maintain demand and stabilize prices. Denver's silver barons celebrated the act as validation of their industry's importance to the national economy. Elaborate parties and public celebrations marked the legislation's passage, with prominent citizens declaring that Denver's future was more secure than ever. But beneath the surface optimism, more perceptive observers recognized that the act represented a political compromise rather than a permanent solution. Eastern financial interests had long favored the gold standard, viewing silver as an inflationary threat to monetary stability. The growing influence of international markets meant that American silver policy was increasingly constrained by global economic forces beyond the control of Western mining interests. Meanwhile, Denver's population continued to surge as new waves of immigrants arrived seeking opportunities in the booming city. The 1890 census recorded nearly 107,000 residents, representing more than a doubling of the population in just 1 decade. This rapid growth brought both opportunities and challenges that tested the city's ability to maintain the quality of life that had attracted so many newcomers. Housing construction struggled to keep pace with demand, leading to overcrowding in some neighborhoods and the development of substandard housing in others. The elegant mansions of Capitol Hill and the comfortable middle-class homes of Highland contrasted sharply with the cramped tenements and boarding houses that housed many working-class families. These disparities reflected the growing economic inequality that accompanied Denver's rapid development. The transportation network within the city expanded to serve the growing population and geographic spread. Electric streetcar lines multiplied, connecting distant neighborhoods to the downtown business district and making suburban development feasible for the first time. The streetcar companies wielded enormous influence over development patterns, as areas with good transit access flourished, while those without convenient connections struggled to attract residents and businesses. Competition among streetcar companies led to redundant routes in profitable areas, while leaving some neighborhoods underserved. City officials found themselves mediating disputes between rival companies and trying to ensure adequate service for all residents. The streetcar networks also became focal points for labor disputes, as workers sought better wages and working conditions in an industry that was essential to the city's daily functioning. Denver's downtown core underwent dramatic transformation during the early 1890s as businesses competed to construct increasingly impressive buildings. The Equitable Building, completed in 1892, rose 9 stories above the street level and featured the latest in elevator technology and fireproof construction. Its modern design and sophisticated amenities attracted prestigious tenants and established new standards for commercial architecture in the city. The retail sector continued to evolve as Denver's merchants sought to match the shopping experiences available in established eastern cities. Department stores expanded their offerings and improved their customer services, while specialty shops catered to increasingly sophisticated tastes. The Christmas shopping season of 1892 saw elaborate window displays and promotional events that rivaled those of New York or Chicago, reflecting the city's growing commercial maturity. Cultural institutions flourished as Denver's wealthy residents sought to establish their city's reputation as a center of refinement and sophistication. The Denver Art Association organized exhibitions featuring works by both local and nationally recognized artists. Musical organizations proliferated, from amateur choral groups to professional ensembles that performed regular concert series. The city's theaters presented an increasingly diverse array of productions, from Shakespeare to the latest popular comedies and dramas. But these cultural achievements existed alongside persistent social problems that reflected the challenges of rapid urban growth. Crime rates increased as the population expanded, straining the capacity of law enforcement agencies. Gambling, prostitution, and illegal drinking establishments operated openly in some areas of the city, despite periodic reform campaigns by religious and civic groups. The contrast between Denver's aspirations and realities became particularly evident in the treatment of different ethnic and racial groups. While the city promoted itself as a place of opportunity and equality, discriminatory practices limited access to employment, housing, and public accommodations for many residents. African American families faced particular challenges, often confined to specific neighborhoods and excluded from many businesses and social organizations. The Italian immigrant community that had grown substantially during the construction boom found themselves facing suspicion and prejudice despite their contributions to the city's development. Mexican American families, many of whom had lived in the region since before the Anglo settlement began, struggled to maintain their property rights and cultural traditions in the face of rapid demographic and legal changes. Labour organising intensified as workers sought to address grievances about wages, working conditions, and job security. The skilled craftsmen who had built Denver's impressive buildings formed trade unions that demanded recognition and collective bargaining rights. Factory workers in the city's growing manufacturing sector organised strikes and demonstrations that sometimes erupted into violence when confronted by company security forces and unsympathetic local authorities. The smelter workers who processed ore from the mountain mining districts faced particularly hazardous conditions, with exposure to toxic fumes and dangerous machinery, causing high rates of injury and illness. Their attempts to organise for better safety protections and compensation brought them into conflict with powerful corporate interests that viewed worker demands as threats to profitability and efficiency. Women's roles in Denver society were evolving as the city matured and economic opportunities diversified. While most women remained confined to traditional domestic roles, increasing numbers found employment as teachers, shop clerks, telephone operators, and domestic servants. The growth of department stores and other retail establishments created new opportunities for women to work outside the home, though usually at wages significantly lower than those paid to men. The women's suffrage movement gained momentum in Colorado during this period, with Denver serving as the center of organizing activities. Prominent women like Ellis Meredith and Martha Dalton led campaigns for voting rights and other legal reforms that would improve women's status in society. Their efforts would eventually make Colorado one of the first states to grant women full voting rights, though not without significant opposition from traditional interests. Educational opportunities continued to expand as Denver's leaders recognized the importance of developing local talent and expertise. The public school system added new buildings and programs, though it continued to struggle with overcrowding and limited resources. Private academies flourished, serving families who could afford to pay for enhanced educational opportunities for their children. The University of Denver began to develop more ambitious academic programs, though it remained a small institution with limited resources and regional influence. Professional training programs emerged to serve the growing demand for skilled workers in fields like nursing, accounting, and engineering. These educational developments reflected Denver's transition from a frontier mining town to a more complex urban economy requiring diverse skills and expertise. Religious institutions proliferated as Denver's population became more diverse, and established communities sought to maintain their spiritual and cultural traditions. Protestant denominations remained dominant, but Catholic, Jewish, and Orthodox Christian communities built impressive churches and synagogues that served growing congregations. These religious institutions provided not only spiritual guidance, but also social services, educational programs, and cultural activities that helped integrate newcomers into community life. The medical profession in Denver advanced significantly as the city attracted physicians trained in the latest techniques and theories. The establishment of several hospitals improved healthcare access for residents, while specialized clinics addressed specific medical conditions. Denver's reputation as a destination for tuberculosis treatment grew during this period, as the high altitude and dry climate were believed to benefit patients suffering from the disease. Banking and financial services became increasingly sophisticated as Denver's economy diversified and expanded. Local banks developed expertise in financing mining operations, real estate development, and commercial enterprises. The city's financial institutions began extending their reach beyond Colorado, establishing correspondent relationships with banks in other western cities and eastern financial centers. The insurance industry emerged as an important sector as property values increased and business operations became more complex. Fire insurance was particularly crucial in a city where devastating fires remained a constant threat despite improvements in fire protection services. Life insurance companies established offices to serve Denver's growing middle class, while specialized firms offered coverage for mining operations and other high-risk enterprises. Real estate development accelerated as Denver's population growth created demand for both residential and commercial properties. Subdivisions appeared on the outskirts of the city, offering affordable lots for families seeking to build their own homes. Downtown property values soared as businesses competed for prime locations, leading to increasingly intensive development of the central business district. The legal profession grew in both size and sophistication as Denver's economy became more complex. Lawyers specialized in areas like mining law, railroad regulation, and corporate finance, while also handling the full range of civil and criminal matters that arose in a growing city. The establishment of law libraries and professional associations helped maintain standards and facilitate the exchange of information among practitioners. Journalism flourished as multiple newspapers competed for readers and influence in the rapidly changing city. Editorial positions on local and national issues shaped public opinion and political outcomes, while comprehensive news coverage kept residents informed about developments affecting their community. The competitive newspaper environment encouraged high standards of reporting and commentary that contributed to Denver's reputation as a well-informed and politically engaged city. As 1893 approached, Denver appeared to be at the height of its prosperity and influence. The city had successfully navigated the transition from mining camp to major urban center, developing sophisticated institutions and infrastructure that rivaled those of much older cities. The population continued to grow, businesses thrived, and cultural life flourished in ways that seemed to promise continued progress and prosperity. But the foundations of Denver's success were about to be tested by economic forces that would challenge everything the city had built over the previous 3 decades. The crisis that was approaching would force Denver's residents to confront fundamental questions about their community's future and their ability to adapt to changing circumstances beyond their control. The decisions made during the coming upheaval would determine whether Denver would survive as a major American city or join the ranks of western boomtowns that had flourished briefly before fading into obscurity. The resilience and adaptability that had carried the city through previous challenges would be tested as never before, setting the stage for the most critical period in Denver's early history. The catastrophe that struck Denver in 1893 came not from flood, fire, or natural disaster, but from decisions made in distant Washington corridors of power. On June 26, 1893, Congress repealed the Sherman-Silver Purchase Act, effectively ending the federal government's commitment to silver as a monetary standard. The news reached Denver by telegraph within hours, and the impact was immediate and devastating. Silver prices collapsed overnight, plummeting from over $1 per ounce to less than 60 cents. Mining operations throughout Colorado shut down almost instantly, as ore that had been profitable one day became worthless the next. The economic earthquake that followed would test every assumption Denver's leaders had made about their city's future and challenge the very survival of the community they had worked so hard to build. The first casualties were the mining camps themselves. Leadville, which had boasted a population of over 30,000 during the boom years, began emptying as miners packed their belongings and headed elsewhere in search of work. Central City, Georgetown, and dozens of smaller settlements experienced similar mass departures. The mountain towns that had generated so much of Denver's wealth simply ceased to exist as functioning communities within months. Denver's business district felt the shockwaves immediately. The freight companies that had prospered hauling supplies to the mining camps found their services no longer needed. Warehouses filled with mining equipment and supplies became worthless inventory that couldn't be sold at any price. The banks that had financed mining operations faced massive loan defaults, while the merchants who had extended credit to miners and camp businesses watched their accounts receivable become uncollectible debts. The human cost was staggering. Unemployment in Denver soared to levels that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Families that had enjoyed comfortable middle-class lifestyles found themselves unable to pay rent or buy food. The elegant hotels that had hosted wealthy mining investors became flophouses for desperate families with nowhere else to go. Soup kitchens appeared on street corners where fashionable shops had once attracted prosperous customers. The psychological impact was perhaps even more devastating than the immediate economic consequences. Denver's residents had built their community on the assumption that prosperity would continue indefinitely. The silver boom had lasted long enough that many people had come to view it as permanent rather than cyclical. The sudden collapse shattered confidence in ways that would influence decision-making for generations to come. City government faced an impossible situation as tax revenues evaporated while demand for public services increased dramatically. Property values plummeted as desperate owners tried to sell homes and businesses to raise cash for basic necessities. The municipal bond issues that had financed infrastructure improvements suddenly became crushing burdens on a city with a drastically reduced ability to generate revenue. The banks that had been pillars of Denver's financial community began failing in rapid succession. Depositors lined up outside bank buildings, hoping to withdraw their savings before the institutions collapsed entirely. The panic spread to healthy banks as rumors and fear overwhelmed rational assessment of financial soundness. Within months, Denver's banking system had been decimated, leaving the city without adequate financial services to support even basic commercial activities. Real estate values collapsed as the population began hemorrhaging. The mansions of Capitol Hill, which had sold for enormous sums during the boom years, couldn't find buyers at any price. Middle-class homes in established neighborhoods became available for fractions of their previous values, but few people had the resources to purchase them. The construction industry, which had employed thousands of workers during the growth years, virtually disappeared as demand for new buildings evaporated. The railroads that had been so crucial to Denver's development found their freight volumes declining precipitously. The ore shipments that had provided steady revenue disappeared almost overnight, while the flow of supplies to mining communities reversed direction as camps disbanded and equipment was hauled away for sale elsewhere. Railroad employment dropped sharply, contributing to the city's unemployment crisis and reducing demand for local goods and services. Cultural institutions that had flourished during the prosperous years struggled to survive as patronage dried up. The opera house that had hosted celebrated performers found audiences unwilling or unable to purchase tickets. Art galleries closed as collectors sold their holdings to raise cash for necessities. Even churches and charitable organizations faced financial difficulties as their supporters could no longer afford to maintain previous levels of giving. The social fabric of Denver began to fray under the stress of economic collapse. Crime rates increased as desperate people resorted to theft and other illegal activities to survive. Domestic violence escalated as families struggled with unemployment, poverty, and the loss of hope for a better future. The ethnic tensions that had simmered during the boom years erupted into open conflict as different groups competed for scarce employment opportunities. Women found themselves in particularly difficult situations as traditional gender roles offered little preparation for the economic realities of the Depression. Many women were forced to seek employment for the first time, often accepting wages that were barely adequate for survival. The domestic service sector expanded as wealthy families reduced their household staff, while middle-class families could no longer afford any paid help at all. Children suffered disproportionately as families struggled to provide basic necessities like food and clothing. School attendance declined as children were pressed into whatever work they could find to contribute to family income. Malnutrition became visible in the city's neighborhoods, particularly among the families of unemployed miners and construction workers who had lost their livelihoods when the silver boom collapsed. The newspaper industry, which had thrived during the competitive boom years, faced its own crisis as advertising revenue disappeared and readers could no longer afford subscriptions. Several publications folded entirely, while others merged or reduced their operations to skeleton crews. The surviving newspapers documented the city's struggles with a mixture of factual reporting and desperate optimism about future recovery prospects. Religious institutions became focal points for charitable activities as traditional social services proved inadequate for the scale of the crisis. Churches organized soup kitchens and temporary shelters for homeless families, while religious leaders struggled to provide spiritual comfort to congregations facing unprecedented hardship. The diversity of Denver's religious communities became a strength during this period, as different denominations cooperated in relief efforts that transcended traditional sectarian boundaries. Political leadership faced enormous challenges as elected officials tried to respond to a crisis that was largely beyond their control. City council meetings became contentious affairs as residents demanded action to address unemployment and poverty, while the municipal government lacked resources to provide meaningful assistance. Some politicians advocated for radical solutions, including public works programs and direct relief payments, while others insisted that government intervention would only make the situation worse. The federal government's response to the economic collapse was limited and often counterproductive. President Grover Cleveland's adherence to gold standard orthodoxy meant that monetary policy remained restrictive even as deflation devastated debtor communities like Denver. The lack of federal assistance programs meant that local communities were left to cope with the crisis using their own severely limited resources. Some Denver residents abandoned the city entirely, joining the reverse migration that saw thousands of people leaving Colorado for opportunities in other regions. The population decline was particularly severe among skilled workers and professionals who had alternatives elsewhere. Families that had invested their life savings in Denver real estate found themselves trapped by properties they couldn't sell and debts they couldn't repay. But even in the depths of the crisis, some Denver residents began working towards solutions that would position the city for eventual recovery. Forward-thinking business leaders recognized that the collapse of the silver economy, while devastating in the short term, created opportunities to diversify into less volatile industries. Agriculture, manufacturing, and services began receiving attention as potential foundations for a more stable economic future. The transportation advantages that had made Denver a mining supply center remained relevant for other industries. The railroad connections that had brought mining equipment could just as easily transport manufactured goods or agricultural products. The city's central location between the Great Plains and the Pacific Coast continued to offer strategic advantages for businesses serving Western markets. Local boosters began promoting Denver's climate and scenery as attractions for tourists and health seekers. The sanatoriums that had treated tuberculosis patients during the boom years expanded their marketing efforts, positioning Denver as a destination for people seeking recovery from various ailments. While tourism couldn't replace the mining economy, it offered one avenue for generating revenue and employment during the recovery period. Agricultural development in the South Platte River Valley accelerated as farmers sought to take advantage of reduced land prices and available labor. The irrigation systems that had been developed during the boom years could support expanded crop production if markets could be found for the output. Denver's role as a processing and distribution center for agricultural products began to emerge as a potential foundation for economic recovery. Small-scale manufacturing operations began appearing as entrepreneurs sought to serve local markets with products that had previously been imported from eastern cities. The reduced labor costs and available factory space created opportunities for businesses that could operate profitably on smaller scales than had been feasible during the boom years. While these enterprises couldn't immediately replace the lost mining economy, they represented important steps toward diversification. The crisis also accelerated political and social reforms that had been resisted during the prosperous years. Women's suffrage gained support as traditional arguments about women's roles seemed less relevant in a community where survival required everyone's contributions. Labor organizing intensified as workers recognized the need for collective action to protect their interests in an unstable economy. Educational institutions adapted to serve the changing needs of the community. The University of Denver expanded its practical training programs while reducing emphasis on classical education that seemed less relevant to immediate economic needs. Public schools incorporated vocational training as families demanded education that would prepare their children for available employment opportunities. The medical profession faced new challenges as patients could no longer afford private healthcare services. Some physicians began accepting payment in goods or services rather than cash, while others organized charitable clinics to serve indigent patients. The crisis accelerated discussions about public health measures and community responsibility for medical care that would influence policy debates for decades to come. Banking slowly began to recover as the surviving institutions developed more conservative lending practices and focused on serving local rather than speculative investments. The financial sector that emerged from the crisis was smaller and more cautious than its predecessor, but also more stable and better adapted to serve a diversified economy rather than a single dominant industry. By 1895, the worst of the crisis had passed, though recovery would be slow and incomplete for many Denver families. The city that emerged from the silver crash was fundamentally different from the booming metropolis of the early 1890s. It was smaller, poorer, and more cautious, but also more diversified and potentially more stable. The lessons learned during this traumatic period would influence Denver's development strategies and risk management approaches well into the 20th century. The silver crash of 1893 had destroyed the economic foundation that Denver had been built upon, but it had not destroyed the community's determination to survive and prosper. The adaptability and resilience that had carried Denver through previous challenges would once again prove crucial as the city worked to reinvent itself for a new era. The foundations for Denver's future success were being laid even as the community struggled to recover from its greatest crisis since the founding of the settlement along Cherry Creek nearly 4 decades earlier. The period following the silver crash witnessed a remarkable transformation in Denver's character and ambitions. As the city struggled to rebuild from the economic devastation, a new generation of leaders emerged with fresh ideas about what Denver could become. They understood that relying on a single industry had nearly destroyed their community, and they were determined to create a more resilient and diversified foundation for future prosperity. Agriculture began to play an increasingly important role in Denver's recovery strategy. The fertile lands surrounding the city had always possessed potential, but during the mining boom, most attention and investment had focused on extracting wealth from the mountains rather than cultivating the plains. Now, with mining revenues gone and land prices depressed, farming offered one of the few viable paths forward for the struggling community. The development of sugar beet cultivation proved particularly significant for Denver's agricultural sector. German immigrants brought expertise in sugar beet farming and processing, establishing operations that required substantial local labor and created markets for related services. The Colorado Sugar Manufacturing Company built processing facilities near Denver, providing employment for hundreds of workers and creating demand for transportation, equipment, and other support services. Cattle ranching expanded dramatically as Denver's entrepreneurs recognized the advantages of the region's vast grasslands and railroad connections to eastern markets. The techniques developed during the open range era were refined and systematized, while improvements in breeding and feeding practices increased productivity and profitability. Denver became a major cattle shipping point, with stockyards and processing facilities that served ranchers across the Great Plains. The irrigation systems that had been developed during earlier periods were expanded and improved to support agricultural diversification. Canal companies organized to bring mountain water to previously arid lands, transforming thousands of acres into productive farmland. The engineering challenges were substantial, requiring sophisticated planning and coordination among multiple stakeholders. But the results were dramatic improvements in agricultural output and rural prosperity. Manufacturing slowly gained traction as Denver's business leaders recognized the potential for serving regional markets with locally produced goods. The city's transportation advantages remained intact despite the mining collapse, and the availability of skilled workers at reduced wages created opportunities for industrial development. Small factories began producing everything from furniture and clothing to processed foods and construction materials. The brewing industry became particularly successful as Denver's German immigrant community applied their traditional skills to serve the growing regional market. Breweries like Coors, founded in nearby Golden, and Zhang Brewing in Denver itself, took advantage of pure mountain water and local agricultural products to create distinctive beers that found markets throughout the Rocky Mountain region. Flour milling emerged as another important industry as wheat production expanded on the eastern plains. Denver's position as a transportation hub made it an ideal location for processing grain from across Colorado and neighboring states. The mills that were established during this period would remain important employers and economic contributors for decades to come. The tourism industry began developing as Denver's promoters recognized the marketing potential of Colorado's spectacular scenery and outdoor recreation opportunities. The railroads that had been built to serve mining operations could just as easily transport visitors seeking adventure and scenic beauty. Hotels and guide services began catering to tourists interested in hunting, fishing, and mountain climbing expeditions. Health tourism became particularly important as Denver's high altitude and dry climate gained recognition as beneficial for treating various medical conditions. Tuberculosis patients arrived from across the nation seeking recovery in Colorado's mountain air, creating demand for sanatoriums, medical services, and long-term housing. While the health seekers couldn't replace the economic impact of mining, they provided steady revenue streams that helped stabilize local businesses. The development of professional services reflected Denver's growing sophistication and economic diversity. Law firms expanded beyond mining and real estate specializations to serve agricultural, manufacturing, and tourism clients. Accounting practices emerged to handle the increasingly complex financial requirements of diversified businesses. Engineering firms found opportunities in irrigation projects, railroad construction, and urban infrastructure development. Educational institutions adapted to serve the changing needs of the recovering community. The Colorado School of Mines adjusted its curriculum to address broader engineering challenges beyond mineral extraction. The University of Denver expanded programs in business, agriculture, and teacher training. Public schools incorporated practical subjects that would prepare students for opportunities in the diversified economy that was slowly emerging. Banking gradually recovered as financial institutions developed more conservative lending practices and focused on serving local businesses rather than speculative ventures. The banks that survived the crash were smaller and more cautious, but they were also more stable and better equipped to support steady economic growth rather than boom and bust cycles. The construction industry found new opportunities as Denver's population stabilized and infrastructure needs became apparent. While the elaborate mansions and commercial buildings of the boom years were no longer feasible, there was steady demand for modest homes, practical commercial structures, and public facilities. The building techniques and architectural styles that emerged during this period reflected both economic constraints and practical considerations. Transportation continued to evolve as Denver's role as a regional hub became more important. Additional railroad lines connected the city to agricultural areas and small towns throughout Colorado and neighboring states. The streetcar system expanded to serve growing residential areas, while freight operations adapted to handle diverse cargoes beyond mining equipment and supplies. Women's roles in Denver society continue to evolve as economic necessity forced changes in traditional gender expectations. More women entered the workforce, often in positions that had previously been reserved for men. The suffrage movement gained momentum as women demonstrated their capabilities and contributions to community survival during the crisis years. Labour organising intensified as workers recognised the need for collective action to protect their interests in an uncertain economy. The unions that emerged during this period were more pragmatic and less confrontational than their predecessors, focusing on workplace safety, fair wages, and job security rather than radical political change. The relationship between labour and management began evolving toward greater cooperation and mutual recognition of shared interests. Political leadership adapted to address the challenges of economic diversification and community rebuilding. City government focused on practical issues like infrastructure maintenance, public health, and business development, rather than the grand civic projects that had characterized the boom years. The political culture became more collaborative and less partisan as community survival took precedence over ideological disputes. Religious institutions played crucial roles in maintaining community cohesion during the difficult transition period. Churches and synagogues provided not only spiritual comfort, but also practical assistance through charitable programs and mutual aid societies. The cooperation among different religious communities that had developed during the crisis years continued to influence Denver's social character well beyond the immediate recovery period. Cultural activities gradually resumed as economic conditions improved and residents sought recreation and entertainment. While the elaborate productions and expensive entertainments of the boom years were no longer feasible, simpler pleasures like community concerts, amateur theatrical productions, and social gatherings helped maintain the cultural life that distinguished Denver from smaller frontier settlements. The newspaper industry recovered slowly as advertising revenues returned and readers could again afford subscriptions. The surviving publications had learned to operate more efficiently and to serve their communities with more practical and less sensational coverage. The competitive environment that had characterized the boom years gave way to a more stable and service-oriented approach to journalism. Real estate markets began stabilizing as population decline slowed and economic diversification created new sources of demand. While property values remained well below boom-era peaks, the extreme volatility that had characterized the immediate post-crash period gradually subsided. New development focused on practical rather than speculative projects, creating a more sustainable foundation for future growth. The legal profession adapted to serve the needs of a more diversified economy. Lawyers developed expertise in agricultural law, manufacturing regulations, and tourism-related issues. The practice of law became less focused on mining claims and more concerned with the complex legal framework required to support multiple industries and varied business relationships. Medical services continued to expand as Denver's reputation as a health destination attracted both patients and practitioners. The medical community that developed during this period was more diverse and better organized than its predecessor, with specialists in various fields and improved facilities for both routine and complex medical care. By the late 1890s, Denver had successfully navigated the transition from a single industry mining town to a diversified regional center. The city was smaller and less wealthy than it had been during the silver boom, but it was also more stable and better positioned for sustainable long-term growth. The lessons learned during the crisis years had created a more mature and realistic approach to economic development that would serve Denver well in the decades ahead. The foundation for Denver's 20th century development had been established through the painful process of economic collapse and rebuilding. The diversified economy that emerged from the crisis would prove more resilient to external shocks and better able to adapt to changing national and international conditions. The community spirit and practical problem-solving skills that had carried Denver through its greatest crisis would continue to influence the city's character as it faced new challenges and opportunities in the coming century. As the new century dawned, Denver stood poised to embrace opportunities that its leaders could scarcely have imagined during the dark days following the silver crash. The 20th century would bring transformations as dramatic as any the city had experienced, though this time the changes would unfold more gradually and with greater attention to sustainable development rather than speculative excess. The discovery of oil along Colorado's Front Range in the early 1900s initially raised concerns among Denver's civic leaders, who remembered all too well the boom and bust cycle that had nearly destroyed their community. However, the petroleum industry that developed proved fundamentally different from the silver mining that had dominated the previous era. Oil production required substantial infrastructure investments, long-term planning, and sophisticated refining operations that created more stable employment and business relationships. The Rocky Mountain Oil Company established refining operations near Denver, taking advantage of the city's transportation networks and skilled workforce. Unlike the isolated mountain mining camps that had characterized the silver era, oil operations were integrated into existing communities and required ongoing relationships with suppliers, contractors, and service providers. This industrial development created multiplier effects throughout the local economy without the extreme volatility that had characterized mineral extraction. As agricultural development accelerated, as irrigation technology improved and markets expanded for Colorado's farm products. The sugar beet industry that had emerged during the recovery years grew into a major economic sector, with processing plants in several communities around Denver. These operations provided seasonal employment for thousands of workers, while creating year-round demand for transportation, equipment maintenance, and financial services. The development of dry farming techniques allowed agricultural expansion into areas that had previously been considered unsuitable for cultivation. Farmers learned to work with Colorado's challenging climate and soil conditions, developing methods that maximize productivity while minimizing risk. Denver's role as a supply and marketing center for this agricultural expansion brought steady growth in related industries and services. Manufacturing continued to diversify as entrepreneurs recognized opportunities to serve the growing regional market. The geographic isolation that had once been a disadvantage for Colorado businesses became an asset as transportation costs provided natural protection against distant competitors. Local manufacturers could offer faster delivery, better customer service, and products adapted to regional preferences and conditions. The food processing industry expanded beyond flour milling to include meatpacking, canning, and other value-added operations. Denver's stockyards became major facilities serving ranchers across the Great Plains, while processing plants converted raw materials into finished products for distribution throughout the Rocky Mountain region. These operations provided stable employment and created demand for related services and supplies. Textile manufacturing emerged as German and Eastern European immigrants brought specialized skills and equipment to Colorado. While the industry never achieved the scale of operations in eastern industrial centers, local textile production served regional markets and provided employment for hundreds of workers. The smaller scale of operations allowed for greater flexibility and responsiveness to changing market conditions. The construction industry evolved to serve the changing needs of Denver's growing and diversifying economy. Residential construction focused on practical, affordable housing for working families rather than the elaborate mansions of the boom era. Commercial buildings were designed for functionality and efficiency, reflecting both economic constraints and changing business practices. Public works projects began addressing infrastructure needs that had been neglected during the economic crisis. Street improvements, sewer system expansions, and water supply upgrades reflected the city's commitment to supporting long-term growth rather than temporary speculation. These investments required careful planning and financing, but they created the foundation for sustained development. The arrival of electric power transformed both residential and commercial life in Denver. Electric lighting replaced gas fixtures in homes and businesses, while electric motors began powering industrial equipment. The Denver Gas and Electric Company expanded its operations to meet growing demand, creating new employment opportunities and improving productivity across multiple sectors. Telephone service expanded rapidly as businesses and affluent residents recognized the advantages of instant communication. The Colorado Telephone Company built networks connecting Denver to surrounding communities and eventually to other major cities across the nation. This communication revolution accelerated business transactions and reduced the isolation that had historically challenged Rocky Mountain communities. Automotive transportation began making its appearance as wealthy Denver residents purchased the first motor cars. While horses and streetcars remained the primary means of transportation, the potential implications of automotive technology were beginning to influence planning discussions. Forward-thinking civic leaders recognized that this new form of transportation might eventually transform urban development patterns. The tourism industry continued developing as railroad companies promoted Colorado's scenic attractions to national audiences. The Colorado Midland Railway and other lines offered special excursion packages featuring mountain scenery, hunting and fishing opportunities, and visits to historic mining camps. Hotels and guide services in Denver and surrounding communities expanded to serve the growing visitor market. Health tourism remained important as Denver's reputation for treating respiratory ailments attracted patients from across the nation. The National Jewish Hospital for Consumptives, established in 1899, became a leading treatment center for tuberculosis and other lung diseases. The presence of medical facilities and health seekers created ongoing demand for services and contributed to Denver's growing reputation as a regional medical center. Educational institutions expanded their programs and facilities to serve the growing and diversifying community. The University of Denver added professional schools in law, medicine, and engineering, while maintaining strong liberal arts programs. The Colorado School of Mines developed expertise in petroleum engineering and other fields beyond traditional mining, reflecting the changing economic landscape. Public education improved as city leaders recognized the importance of preparing students for opportunities in the diversified economy. New schools were built to serve growing residential areas, while curriculum changes emphasized practical skills alongside traditional academic subjects. Vocational training programs prepared students for careers in manufacturing, agriculture, and emerging technical fields. The financial sector recovered gradually as banks developed expertise in serving diverse industries rather than concentrating on speculative ventures. Local banks learned to evaluate agricultural loans, manufacturing investments, and commercial real estate projects using more sophisticated analysis than had characterized the boom era. This conservative approach provided stability while supporting steady economic growth. Insurance services expanded as business operations became more complex and property values recovered from their post-crash lows. Fire insurance remained crucial in a city where devastating blazes continued to pose threats, while new forms of coverage addressed the risks associated with manufacturing operations, transportation activities, and professional services. Real estate development resumed on a more sustainable basis as population growth and economic diversification created steady demand for both residential and commercial properties. Subdivisions were planned with greater attention to infrastructure needs and long-term livability rather than quick profits. Commercial development focused on practical buildings designed to serve local businesses rather than speculative ventures. The legal profession continued evolving to serve the needs of an increasingly complex economy. Lawyers developed specializations in corporate law, agricultural issues, labor relations, and regulatory compliance. The practice of law became more professional and systematic, with bar associations establishing standards for education, ethics, and competency. Labor relations improved as both workers and employers recognized the benefits of cooperation and mutual respect. The unions that emerged during the recovery period focused on practical issues like workplace safety, fair wages, and job security rather than confrontational politics. Management generally accepted the legitimacy of worker organizations while insisting on productive relationships that served mutual interests. Women's participation in Denver's economic and social life continued expanding as traditional restrictions seemed less relevant in a community that valued practical contributions over conventional roles. Women entered professions like teaching, nursing, and clerical work in increasing numbers, while also playing important roles in charitable organizations, cultural institutions, and reform movements. The suffrage movement gained momentum as Colorado women demonstrated their capabilities and community contributions during the challenging recovery years. The state's decision to grant women full voting rights in 1893 made Colorado a pioneer in gender equality, though implementation of these rights faced ongoing challenges and resistance. Religious institutions adapted to serve the changing needs of Denver's diverse population. Churches and synagogues continued providing spiritual guidance while also organizing social services, educational programs, and community activities. The interfaith cooperation that had developed during the crisis years continued to influence Denver's religious community and contribute to social cohesion. Cultural activities resumed and expanded as economic conditions improved and residents sought entertainment and enrichment opportunities. The Denver Art Museum, established in 1893, grew its collections and programs to serve both local residents and visitors. Musical organizations flourished, from amateur groups to professional ensembles that performed regular concert series. Theater returned to Denver as touring companies, again included the city on their circuits, and local groups organized productions for community audiences. While the elaborate opera houses of the boom era were no longer financially viable, smaller venues provided opportunities for dramatic and musical performances that enriched cultural life. The newspaper industry stabilized as competition decreased and surviving publications focused on serving their communities with practical information and responsible journalism. The sensational coverage that had characterized the boom years gave way to more measured reporting of local events, business developments, and civic issues. Political leadership matured as elected officials gained experience managing municipal affairs during challenging economic conditions. City government focused on practical issues like infrastructure maintenance, public health, and business development rather than grand projects or partisan conflicts. The collaborative approach that had emerged during the crisis years continued to influence local political culture. By 1910, Denver had successfully established itself as a diversified regional center with a stable economic foundation and mature civic institutions. The city's population had grown to over 213,000, representing steady but sustainable growth rather than the dramatic fluctuations of earlier decades. The lessons learned during the silver crash had created a more cautious and realistic approach to development that would serve Denver well in the decades ahead. The foundation for Denver's continued growth and development had been established through careful planning, economic diversification, and community cooperation. The city that emerged from the early 20th century transformation was prepared to face new challenges and opportunities with greater wisdom and resilience than had characterized its earlier boom and bust cycles. Transportation improvements continued reshaping Denver's development patterns as streetcar lines extended into previously undeveloped areas. The electric trolley system that had begun in the 1890s expanded to serve growing residential neighborhoods, making suburban living feasible for middle-class families. These transportation networks influenced land use patterns and encouraged the spread of Denver's residential areas in all directions. The Denver Tramway Company operated an extensive network of streetcar lines that connected downtown Denver with surrounding communities like Highlands, Capitol Hill, and Five Points. The reliable transportation encouraged residential development along the trolley routes while creating employment opportunities for conductors, maintenance workers, and support personnel. Interurban rail lines began connecting Denver with neighboring cities and towns, facilitating both passenger travel and freight transportation. These connections strengthened Denver's role as the regional hub while encouraging economic development in smaller communities that could now access Denver's markets and services more easily. The automobile remained a curiosity for most Denver residents, though wealthy families began purchasing motorcars for recreation and convenience. The primitive road conditions and limited support services made automotive transportation impractical for most purposes, but forward-thinking observers recognized that this new technology might eventually challenge the dominance of rail-based transportation systems. Industrial development accelerated as Denver's advantages as a regional manufacturing center became more apparent. The city's central location, transportation networks, and skilled workforce attracted businesses seeking to serve Western markets. Manufacturing operations ranged from food processing and textiles to machinery and construction materials. The Colorado Fuel and Iron Company expanded its operations to include steel production, taking advantage of Colorado's coal deposits and iron ore resources. While the company's primary operations were located in Pueblo, Denver served as a major market and distribution center for steel products used in construction, railroad maintenance, and manufacturing throughout the region. Mining equipment manufacturing emerged as a specialty industry, serving operations throughout the Rocky Mountain region. Denver's companies produced everything from small hand tools to complex machinery used in gold, silver, and coal mines. This manufacturing sector provided stable employment while maintaining connections to the mining industry that had originally built Denver's economy. The printing and publishing industry expanded to serve the growing regional market for books, newspapers, magazines, and business materials. Denver's publishers produced everything from local newspapers and agricultural journals to technical manuals and literary works. The industry provided employment for skilled craftsmen while contributing to the region's cultural and intellectual development. Food processing continued expanding as agricultural production increased throughout Colorado and neighboring states. Meatpacking operations served the cattle industry, while flour mills processed wheat from the Great Plains. Canning operations preserved fruits and vegetables for regional distribution, taking advantage of Denver's transportation networks to reach distant markets. The brewing industry matured as local companies like Coors and Zang developed regional and eventually national markets for their products. Colorado's pure mountain water and skilled German immigrant brewmasters created distinctive beers that gained recognition for their quality. The brewing industry provided employment while contributing to Denver's growing reputation for quality manufactured goods. Wholesale and retail trade expanded as Denver's role as a regional distribution center became more important. Merchants established warehouses and showrooms serving retailers throughout Colorado, Wyoming, and neighboring states. The city's transportation advantages made it an efficient location for businesses seeking to serve the scattered communities of the Rocky Mountain region. Department stores grew more sophisticated as Denver's population became more affluent and demanding. The Denver Dry Goods Company and other major retailers offered selections that rivaled those available in eastern cities, while providing employment for hundreds of sales clerks, buyers, and support personnel. These retail establishments contributed to Denver's growing reputation as a regional shopping destination. Banking services continued expanding as financial institutions developed expertise in serving diverse industries and customer needs. Local banks established correspondent relationships with financial centers in Chicago and New York, facilitating business transactions and investment flows. The banking sector provided stability while supporting economic growth across multiple industries. The insurance industry grew more sophisticated as business operations became more complex and property values increased. Companies offered specialized coverage for manufacturing operations, transportation activities, and professional services. The insurance sector provided employment for agents, adjusters, and administrative personnel while spreading risks and encouraging business development. Professional services expanded to meet the needs of Denver's growing and diversifying economy. Engineering firms found opportunities in irrigation projects, railroad construction, manufacturing operations, and urban infrastructure development. Accounting practices served businesses that required more sophisticated financial management than had characterized the simpler operations of earlier decades. Legal services continued evolving as lawyers developed specializations in corporate law, real estate transactions, labor relations, and regulatory compliance. The practice of law became more professional and systematic, with formal education requirements and ethical standards that reflected the growing complexity of legal issues in an industrial society. Medical services expanded as Denver's reputation as a health destination attracted both patients and practitioners. The medical community developed expertise in treating respiratory diseases while also providing general healthcare services to the growing population. Hospitals improved their facilities and capabilities, while private practitioners established successful practices serving diverse patient populations. Educational opportunities continued expanding as civic leaders recognized the importance of developing local talent and expertise. The University of Denver grew its enrollment and academic programs, while public schools added facilities and improved their curricula. Vocational training programs prepared students for careers in the diversified economy that was continuing to develop. Cultural institutions matured as Denver's residents sought entertainment and enrichment opportunities that reflected their growing sophistication and prosperity. The Denver Art Museum expanded its collections and programs, while musical organizations provided regular concerts and performances. Theater companies offered productions that ranged from classical drama to popular entertainment. Religious institutions continued playing important roles in community life, providing not only spiritual guidance but also social services and cultural activities. The diverse religious communities that had developed during Denver's growth contributed to the city's cosmopolitan character while maintaining their distinctive traditions and practices. The newspaper industry provided comprehensive coverage of local, regional, and national events, while serving as forums for public debate and community discussion. Competing publications maintained high standards of journalism while serving different political perspectives and reader interests. The press played crucial roles in informing citizens and promoting civic engagement. Political leadership continued maturing as elected officials gained experience managing municipal affairs and addressing the complex challenges of urban growth. City government focused on practical issues while maintaining fiscal responsibility and promoting business development. The collaborative approach to problem solving that had emerged during earlier crises continued to influence local political culture. By 1915, Denver had established itself as a major American city with a diversified economy, mature institutions, and a stable foundation for continued growth. The population exceeded 256,000, representing steady expansion that reflected both natural increase and continued immigration from other regions. The city had successfully navigated the transition from frontier mining camp to regional metropolis, while maintaining the entrepreneurial spirit and adaptability that had characterized its development from the beginning. The stage was set for Denver's continued evolution as the 20th century progressed, bringing new challenges and opportunities that would test the community's resilience and vision once again. The foundations established during these formative decades would support Denver through the trials and triumphs that lay ahead, ultimately shaping the mile-high metropolis into one of America's most dynamic and successful cities. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 initially seemed like a distant concern to Denver's residents, but the conflict would ultimately accelerate changes that had been building throughout the early decades of the 20th century. As the United States moved toward involvement in the European War, Denver found itself uniquely positioned to contribute to the national war effort, while benefiting from the economic expansion that military production would bring. The demand for agricultural products skyrocketed as European farmlands became battlefields, and American farms were called upon to feed not only the domestic population, but also Allied forces overseas. Colorado's wheat, beef, and other agricultural products found ready markets at prices that brought unprecedented prosperity to rural communities throughout the region. Denver's role as a processing and distribution center for these agricultural goods created thousands of jobs and stimulated growth across multiple sectors of the local economy. Manufacturing operations expanded rapidly to meet wartime demands for everything from military uniforms and equipment to processed foods and industrial materials. The textile mills that had served regional markets during peacetime retooled to produce military clothing, while metal fabrication shops found lucrative contracts for components used in weapons and vehicles. Denver's manufacturers discovered that their products could compete successfully in national markets when transportation costs and delivery times favored Western production centers. The city's strategic location became even more valuable as transcontinental railroads carried unprecedented volumes of freight between eastern industrial centers and Pacific coast ports. Denver's position as a major railroad junction meant that much of this traffic passed through the city, creating opportunities for local businesses to provide services and supplies to the transportation companies. Railroad employment reached new highs as additional workers were needed to handle the increased traffic volumes. Standing in Denver today, surrounded by gleaming skyscrapers and bustling streets, it's remarkable to think that this thriving metropolis began as nothing more than a few prospectors panning for gold along Cherry Creek. From those humble beginnings through boom and bust, silver fortunes, and devastating crashes, Denver has demonstrated an extraordinary ability to adapt and reinvent itself. The mile-high city we know today is the product of countless decisions, struggles, and triumphs that shaped not just a community, but the character of the American West itself.